Okay, number 36. Definitely a common denominator problem, and it's not a bad one if you remember the difference of squares. So if I give you an example, unrelated, and I said x squared minus 9, wouldn't you be able to say that's x minus 3x plus 3? I'm hoping that's a yes. So I'm going to call that denominator 1 minus sine squared of x. 1 minus sine squared of x. And here we go. So if that's my denominator, couldn't I say cosine of x plus cosine of x is 2 cosine of x? Okay. And 1 minus sine squared of x, isn't that the same thing as, what's that, cosine squared of x? So now we have 2 cosine of x over 1 minus sine squared of x is really cosine of x times cosine of x. Cancels right out. Now 2 over cosine of x, couldn't that better be written? Wasn't 1 over cosine, isn't that secant? So I'm going to rewrite that as 2 secant of x. And we're done. Okay? Number 37. Okay, let's think for a second. This one's a little more work, but we can get through it here. We got to find a common denominator still, but I'm going to write it. Tell you what, I'll separate it nicely for a second. I'm going to write sine of x times 1 minus cosine of x. I'm going to write sine of x 1 minus cosine of x. Now, doesn't this quantity go into this quantity, sine of x times? So I'm going to have sine squared of x. Doesn't this go into this, 1 minus cosine of x times? So now I'm going to have 1 minus cosine of x squared. So if I'm going to do this math, I'm just going to do my little binomial trick, and I'm going to say square the first, double the product, square the last. So I'm going to have sine squared of x plus square the first, 1, double the product, isn't that negative 2 cosine of x? And I square the last, I'm going to get positive cosine squared of x. And I look at that for a second and I say, okay, so this and this definitely give me a 1. 1 and 1 is 2. Now I have 2 minus 2 cosine of x all over sine of x, 1 minus cosine of x. Now, the biggest rule you cannot forget is always factor. Okay, if you can, factor it out. So I'm going to look at the top and say, couldn't I yank out a 2? And say I have 2, 1 minus, what does that give me? Cosine of x all over sine of x, 1 minus cosine of x, and say, So isn't sine 1 over sine the same as cosecant, better written? So now I have 2 cosecant of x. Good job.